The nanny was about to leave forever until the millionaire's child handed her a drawing with a secret. "You've crossed the line, Claire. Pack your things and leave." Those cold words, spoken by Richard Davenport himself, echoed through the marble halls of the mansion that morning. They cut sharper than glass, and they were the reason Claire Thompson now stood in the grand hallway with her small suitcase at her side, ready to walk away from the life she had given her heart to. That's how it all began on a cold morning in Chicago, inside a mansion where silence spoke louder than love. Hi, I'm John Parker, and today's story will touch your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give your like. It's very important to me. And tell me in the comments which city or country you're listening from. Claire's hands trembled as she folded the last of her belongings into that worn suitcase. Years of loyalty, sacrifice, and raising another man's child as if she were her own, all of it was ending in that moment. The polished marble floors felt colder than ever, as if the house itself mourned her departure. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she had promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not in front of Richard Davenport, not in front of the millionaire who had treated her like nothing more than an employee. Despite all the love she had poured into raising his only daughter, Richard Davenport's name carried weight across Chicago's elite. Davenport Industries stood as a monument of power, built on steel, glass, and unshakable arrogance. To business rivals, he was ruthless. To society, he was enviable. But within his own walls, he was distant, a shadow of a father who believed money could replace affection. And then there was Emily, his fragile, bright-eyed daughter, only 7 years old, with her strawberry blonde hair falling constantly into her curious eyes. Emily had lost her mother too soon, and in her loneliness she had found solace in Claire. The nanny wasn't just Miss Claire, she was bedtime stories, lullabies, warm hugs in the dark. To Emily she wasn't staff, she was family, but Richard couldn't see it. Instead, he accused Claire of overstepping, of daring to fill a role that wasn't hers. Those words had cut deeper than any blade. And so, with dignity, Claire packed her things, deciding her place was no longer in this mansion. Yet just as she took her final step toward the door, something unexpected shattered the silence. Emily ran forward, her little arms wrapped around a folded sheet of paper as if it were treasure. Her voice cracked with urgency. "Miss Claire, you can't go yet. You have to see this." Claire bent down, forcing a fragile smile while her heart broke at the thought of leaving the child who had become her own. Emily's tiny hands, still smudged with colored pencils, offered the drawing. It wasn't just a picture, it was a confession. An explosion of truth disguised in innocent strokes. The paper trembled as Claire unfolded it, her eyes widening as she began to understand what Emily had been trying to reveal for weeks. A secret Richard Davenport had buried beneath his empire of silence and pride was right there, in a child's drawing, and it had the power to shatter everything. Her breath caught. This wasn't just a drawing, it was a revelation, a cry for help wrapped in colors and paper. If she walked out that door without showing it, nothing would ever be the same again. The millionaire had no idea what his daughter had just confessed, and neither did Claire, not fully. But she was about to discover that one innocent drawing could tear down walls of pride. They expose betrayal and ignite redemption in ways no one imagined. And so, as she stood frozen, suitcase in one hand, Emily's drawing in the other, Claire faced a choice: leave forever, or stay and uncover the truth that could finally change Richard Davenport's heart. Because this story isn't about wealth or power. It's about love, secrets, and the moment a child's voice became louder than a millionaire's silence. And what Claire saw in that drawing was only the beginning. The story of Richard Davenport and Claire Thompson didn't begin with anger. It began years earlier, in a moment of desperation, when the millionaire found himself with a child who needed more than his money could ever provide. Richard's wife, Catherine, had passed away suddenly, when Emily was only 3 years old. The tragedy left the little girl fragile, withdrawn, and vulnerable. And Richard, too consumed by his empire, didn't know how to reach her. That was when Claire entered the picture. She wasn't from wealth, nor did she carry the polished confidence of Chicago's high society. She was the daughter of a factory worker from a small town in Indiana, raised with strong values of faith, humility, and perseverance. When she applied for the nanny position, she expected rejection. After all, why would a man like Richard Davenport hire someone like her? with nothing but a kind smile, a modest education, and experience babysitting children from her neighborhood. But something in her sincerity touched Richard's late wife's sister, Margaret, who had been helping Richard manage his home after Catherine's death. "She's not polished," Margaret had said, "but she's warm. And Emily needs warmth more than anything else." Reluctantly, Richard agreed. Claire proved herself from the very first day. She had a way of sitting on the floor with Emily, of listening to her silences, of reading bedtime stories as if every word mattered. Slowly, Emily began to smile again. Slowly, she began to speak. The walls of grief that had surrounded the child cracked open under Claire's gentle persistence. For years, Claire became the heartbeat of the Davenport mansion. She decorated Emily's room with fairy lights, baked cookies on rainy afternoons, and sang lullabies in a soft voice that carried through the long, empty hallways. While Richard signed contracts and expanded Davenport Industries, Claire was the one who braided Emily's hair in the mornings, who cheered at her school recitals, who held her hand when nightmares struck. But the closeness between Claire and Emily came at a price. Richard began to notice how much his daughter depended on the nanny, how she often asked Claire for comfort instead of him. Pride and insecurity brewed in his heart. He didn't like feeling overshadowed, especially not by a woman he saw as the help. One evening, after a particularly difficult board meeting, where Richard's rivals had questioned his leadership, he returned home to find Claire sitting beside Emily's bed, reading a story. Emily's small hand rested in Claire's, her eyes heavy with sleep. For Richard, the sight wasn't comforting. It was threatening. He felt replaced. And in that moment, anger began to build where gratitude should have lived. Emily should be looking at me like that, he thought bitterly, though he never admitted it aloud. That resentment grew in subtle ways. Richard criticized Claire for spoiling Emily, for acting like a mother. He started setting strict boundaries, ordering her to keep her role professional. But each time Emily ran to Claire instead of him, those boundaries felt more like walls closing in. The tension reached its breaking point 1 week before Claire decided to leave. Emily had come home from school upset, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. Richard demanded to know what was wrong, but the little girl only buried her face in Claire's shoulder. That night, Richard confronted her. "You need to stop this, Claire. You're confusing her. You're making her think you're something you're not." Claire stood firm, her voice calm but steady. "I'm only giving Emily what she needs, Richard. She needs affection. She needs someone to listen. If you can't—" "Enough!" His voice thundered through the study. "Don't you dare lecture me on how to raise my child. Pack your things." The decision was final. Or at least Richard thought it was, because what he didn't know was that the piece of paper Emily had been clutching, the one she later gave to Claire, held the truth behind her silence. A truth that would expose not just Claire's devotion, but also the cracks in Richard's own soul. And soon, the secret hidden in that drawing would force the millionaire to face the father he had failed to be. Claire sat on the edge of her small bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the folded drawing Emily had slipped into her suitcase before she closed it. She hadn't dared to open it yet. Her heart pounded, as if she already knew that whatever was on that paper would change everything. The night air outside was heavy with the sound of the city, distant car horns, the faint whistle of a passing train. But inside the Davenport mansion, there was only silence, the kind that makes a person feel more alone than they ever thought possible. Claire pressed the drawing against her chest, her breath uneven. Should she open it? Or should she wait until she was far away, free from Richard Davenport's shadow? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at her door. Emily's small figure appeared, her pajamas slightly wrinkled, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. "Miss Claire," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Did you see it yet?" Claire swallowed hard and shook her head. "Not yet, sweetheart, but I will." She reached out and pulled the girl into her arms. Emily's little body was warm, trembling as if she was carrying the weight of a secret far too big for her age. "Daddy doesn't know," Emily said softly, "and he can't know." "Not yet, but you'll understand." Claire held her tighter. "Emily, what is it? What are you trying to tell me?" But Emily only shook her head, pointing to the paper. "It's in there, everything." When the child returned to bed, Claire finally unfolded the drawing under the dim glow of her bedside lamp. At first it looked like an innocent child's sketch, stick figures, A big house with tall windows and a little girl standing between two people. But then she saw the details that made her blood run cold. One figure had unmistakable golden hair, a scarf tied around her neck, the way Catherine, Emily's late mother, always used to wear. The other figure had broad shoulders and a dark suit, clearly meant to be Richard. But what made Claire's hands tremble was the third figure drawn near them. A woman with long dark hair drawn with a frown, holding Emily's hand tightly. Claire leaned closer, her stomach twisting. Emily had scribbled the word Mom over the dark-haired woman, but Emily, Claire whispered to herself, "Your mother's gone." She turned the paper over, and there in uneven handwriting were the words that stole her breath. "Daddy lies. She's not gone. I saw her." Claire's pulse quickened. Was it possible? Catherine had died in a car accident. Richard had told everyone. There had been a funeral, condolences, flowers, news reports. But a child's innocence doesn't invent such a statement without reason. Emily had seen something or someone that no one else had. Questions tumbled in Claire's mind. Was Catherine really alive? Was Richard hiding something? Was there betrayal woven into the very foundation of the Davenport empire? She pressed the drawing against her heart, whispering a silent prayer. Because if what Emily believed was true, then everything she thought she knew about this family was a lie. And as the first rays of dawn touched the windows of the mansion, Claire realized she could no longer simply walk away. She had stumbled upon a secret that demanded to be uncovered. Even if it meant standing against the most powerful man in Chicago, she had to know the truth. What Claire didn't realize was that the truth would come at a cost higher than she could ever imagine. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Davenport mansion, but to Claire it felt more like a spotlight pressing down on her secret. She hadn't slept. The drawing lay folded in her apron pocket, its words echoing in her mind. "Daddy lies. She's not gone. I saw her." Claire moved through the kitchen in a daze, pouring herself coffee she didn't drink, wiping down counters that were already spotless. Her thoughts swirled. Could Catherine Davenport, the woman Richard swore had died in that terrible car accident, still be alive? Emily padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, holding her stuffed rabbit by the ear. She climbed onto one of the high stools and watched Claire with solemn eyes. "You believe me, don't you, Miss Claire?" Claire crouched down so she was eye level with her. "Emily, sweetheart, where did you see her? Your mom?" The little girl's eyes flickered toward the window, her voice a whisper. "At the park last week. Daddy told me it wasn't her, but I know my mommy's face. She was there. She looked at me, then walked away." Claire's heart clenched. She remembered that day. Richard had dismissed Emily's tears as childish imagination, and Claire hadn't pressed, respecting boundaries. But now it took on a terrifying new meaning. Before Claire could ask more, Richard entered the kitchen, his presence heavy and commanding. He adjusted his cufflinks as if the world were a boardroom, not his own home. "Emily, go upstairs and get ready for school," he said curtly. Emily obeyed, but not before slipping her hand into Claire's for a quick squeeze. Richard's gaze followed the movement, his jaw tightening. "She's too attached to you," he said, his tone sharp. "You're making her soft, dependent. That's not what she needs." Claire rose slowly, her spine straight, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "What she needs is her father, Richard. Not your company, not your empire, you." His eyes hardened. "Don't tell me how to raise my daughter. You forget your place." Claire bit back her words, but the drawing in her pocket burned against her skin. She wanted to hold it up, to shout, "Why did Emily write this? What are you hiding?" But she knew better. If Richard was keeping something this big from the world, confronting him directly would only make him shut down further, or worse, retaliate. Instead, she played her part, nodding politely, letting him believe she had accepted his authority. But as Richard left for his office downtown, Claire made a silent vow. She couldn't walk away anymore. Emily needed her. And if Catherine truly was alive, then Emily deserved the truth, whether Richard wanted it revealed or not. Later that afternoon, while Emily was at school and the house staff busied themselves with their tasks, Claire began her search. She started in Catherine's old study, a room Richard had locked and ignored for years. Margaret, Catherine's sister, had once told Claire, "That room is like a tomb for him. He never goes in." But when Claire turned the brass knob, she was surprised to find it unlocked. Dust hung heavy in the air. Photographs lined the walls. Catherine's radiant smile frozen in time. Claire's fingers traced the frame of one picture, her chest tight. On the desk lay old letters, unpaid bills, even Catherine's journals. Claire opened one, the pages filled with neat handwriting. Most were ordinary entries, recipes, Emily's milestones, plans for charity events. But near the end the words darkened. I don't trust Richard. Something isn't right with the company. If anything happens to me, someone must look deeper. Claire's pulse raced. Could Catherine's supposed accident have been something else? Could the empire Richard guarded so fiercely be built on more than just business secrets? Her hands trembled as she closed the journal. She had uncovered a thread, but pulling it could unravel a story much darker than she imagined. And as the sound of a car pulling into the driveway echoed from outside, Claire quickly shoved the journal back into the drawer. Richard was home earlier than expected. The nanny had stumbled into a secret buried under years of silence, and she was about to find out that someone would do anything to keep it hidden. The atmosphere in the Davenport mansion grew heavier with every passing day, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Claire tried to keep her composure, but the secret burned inside her like fire. She couldn't look at Richard without remembering Catherine's words in that journal. If anything happens to me, someone must look deeper. Richard returned from the office earlier than usual that evening. His polished shoes echoed through the marble hallway as he entered the living room, where Claire sat with Emily working on homework. He paused at the doorway, his gaze fixed on the two of them, Emily's head bent over her coloring book, Claire gently guiding her small hand. For a fleeting moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes, but it vanished just as quickly, replaced by suspicion. "What were you doing upstairs earlier today, Claire?" His tone was sharp, almost accusing. Claire's chest tightened. He must have noticed something. She forced a calm expression. "Tidying the study, Mr. Davenport. I thought it might comfort Emily to see her mother's things cared for." Richard's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, his presence towering. "That room is off limits. I made that clear. Stay out of it." Emily looked up nervously, sensing the tension. Claire placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and gave Richard a steady look. "With all due respect, sir, memories aren't dangerous. Neglecting them is." His lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, Claire feared he might fire her again on the spot. But instead he turned sharply and walked away, muttering under his breath, "You don't understand, Claire. You never will." That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Claire sat in the dim glow of the kitchen lamp, replaying every word in her mind. What exactly didn't she understand? What truth was Richard hiding that even Emily had sensed? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound, soft footsteps in the hallway. Emily appeared again, clutching another piece of paper. This time it wasn't a drawing, but a folded note written in her uneven child's scrawl. "Miss Claire," she whispered urgently, "I found this in Daddy's office." Claire unfolded the note with trembling hands. It was a receipt, stamped with a date that chilled her blood, the day after Catherine's funeral. The address printed on it wasn't a florist, nor a lawyer's office, nor anything tied to mourning. It was for a clinic on the outskirts of the city, a clinic specializing in long-term care. Claire's heart pounded. Why would Richard visit a clinic the day after burying his wife? Emily's little voice broke her thoughts. "Daddy said Mummy went to heaven, but I think he sent her somewhere else." Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she pulled the child into her arms. "Emily, sweetheart, no matter what your father says, you have the right to know the truth. And I promise you I'll find it." But Claire knew she had to tread carefully. Richard was a powerful man, with influence that stretched beyond the walls of his empire. If he was hiding Catherine, he must have had a reason. And people like him didn't let secrets like that surface without a fight. The nanny had stumbled into something far bigger than a family drama. This was a secret that could destroy the Davenport name. And now, with Emily caught in the middle, Claire realized her mission wasn't just about truth, it was about survival. Because if Catherine Davenport was alive, then someone had gone to great lengths to bury her. And secrets buried alive don't stay hidden forever. The receipt weighed heavily in Claire's pocket the next morning as she walked Emily to school. The child skipped along the sidewalk, unaware of the storm brewing in the nanny's heart. Claire's eyes scanned the streets of Chicago, but her mind was elsewhere. fixed on the name of the clinic printed on that slip of paper. Once Emily was safely inside her classroom, Claire lingered by the gates, torn between fear and determination. She could walk away, catch a bus back to Indiana, and leave the Davenports to their secrets. But the image of Emily's tear-streaked face the night before gave her strength. No, she had promised to protect the girl. That meant finding out the truth no matter the cost. By midday, Claire stood outside the clinic. It wasn't like the polished hospital she had seen in the city. It was tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by iron gates and hedges so tall they seemed designed to keep secrets inside. The sign read St. Mary's Private Care Facility. Her pulse raced as she pushed the heavy door open. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and silence. A woman at the reception desk looked up with polite indifference. "Can I help you?" Claire's hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the receipt. "Yes, I'm here to inquire about a patient. This receipt shows that Mr. Richard Davenport made a payment here some years ago." The receptionist's smile faltered. "I'm afraid I can't disclose any patient information. Confidentiality." Claire's voice softened, desperate. "Please, I'm only asking, was Catherine Davenport ever here?" The woman hesitated. For a moment, Claire thought she might be escorted out. But then the receptionist leaned in, her voice low. "You didn't hear this from me. Some names don't appear on the official lists. If you want answers, check the West Wing, 3rd floor." Claire's chest tightened. She whispered a shaky "thank you" and hurried down the sterile hallways, her footsteps echoing. The 3rd floor was eerily quiet, each door marked with numbers instead of names. Her heart pounded as she peeked inside room after room. Elderly patients, some in wheelchairs, some asleep. Nothing unusual. Then, at the end of the hallway, she saw her. A woman sat by the window, her face partially turned away. Long golden hair shimmered in the sunlight, the same golden hair Claire had seen in photographs of Catherine, the same hair Emily had drawn in her picture. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She pressed a hand to the glass of the door, whispering, "Oh my God, it's her." The woman turned slightly, revealing eyes that were distant, clouded with confusion. It was Catherine, alive but not whole. She stared out the window as though the world beyond the glass no longer belonged to her. Claire stumbled back, her mind spinning. Catherine wasn't dead. Richard had hidden her here, locked away from her daughter, her life, everything. Why? Her thoughts collided. Was Catherine sick? Was she being silenced? And most of all, why would Richard lie to his own child, making her believe her mother was gone forever? Claire's knees nearly gave out. The truth Emily had been whispering was real. The millionaire had betrayed not just his daughter, but the memory of his wife, and yet, as Claire pressed her forehead against the cold glass, Catherine's lips moved faintly. One word escaped, fragile but clear. "Emily." The name broke Claire's heart. Catherine remembered. Somewhere inside, the mother was still fighting to reach her child. Claire knew in that moment her mission had changed. She wasn't just a nanny anymore. She was the only bridge between a little girl desperate for her mother and a woman hidden away in the shadows of a lie. But bringing the truth to light would mean war against Richard Davenport. And he was a man who never lost. Claire returned to the mansion with trembling hands and a heart that felt like it would burst from her chest. She had seen Catherine, alive, breathing, whispering her daughter's name. That truth was now carved into her soul. But she also knew that carrying this secret was like holding a lit match in a room filled with gasoline. One wrong move and everything would explode. Emily ran to her the moment she walked through the door. "Did you find her?" The little girl asked, her eyes wide, hopeful. Claire knelt, cupping Emily's face. She wanted so badly to tell her everything, that her mother was alive, that she had spoken her name. But fear gripped her tongue. If Richard found out, Emily could be hurt, and Catherine could vanish again into some deeper, darker place where no one could find her. "Sweetheart," Claire said gently, forcing a smile, "I promise you I'm doing everything I can to help you." But promises were fragile things in the Davenport household. That evening, Richard came home earlier than expected. His coat still on, he stormed into the living room, where Claire was helping Emily with her reading. His face was darker than she had ever seen it. "Where were you today, Claire?" His voice was ice. Claire's stomach dropped. He knew. Somehow he knew. "I took Emily to school, ran some errands." She tried to keep her tone casual, but Richard's eyes bore into hers like knives. "Don't lie to me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice but sharpening each word. "I know you've been snooping. I warned you about the study. And now I hear from someone that you were seen near St. Mary's Clinic." Claire's blood ran cold. He had eyes everywhere. Richard leaned in so close she could smell the expensive cologne mixed with the bitterness of anger. "You have no idea what you're playing with. Stay out of it, Claire. Do your job or pack your things and leave this house tonight." Emily's small voice broke the tension. "Daddy, why are you yelling at Miss Claire?" She clutched Claire's arm, her eyes filling with tears. "She didn't do anything wrong." Richard froze for a moment, his jaw tightening as he looked at his daughter. His voice softened just enough to mask the fury still bubbling beneath the surface. "Go upstairs, Emily, now." The child obeyed reluctantly, glancing back at Claire with fear in her eyes. When they were alone, Richard's mask slipped again. He grabbed Claire's wrist, not enough to hurt, but enough to send a clear message of control. "You don't know the truth, Claire. Catherine, she's not who you think she is. And if you care about Emily, you'll keep your mouth shut." He released her abruptly, his eyes filled with something more than anger, something that looked almost like fear. Richard Davenport, the millionaire who ruled Chicago with an iron grip, was afraid, and that terrified Claire even more than his threats. That night, long after the mansion had gone quiet, Claire lay awake in her small room. Richard's words echoed in her mind. "Catherine's not who you think she is." What did that mean? Was Catherine dangerous? Or was Richard twisting the truth to protect his own reputation? Claire knew only one thing. She could no longer fight this battle alone. If she wanted to uncover the full story, she needed allies, someone outside the mansion who could help her bring the truth to light. But alliances come with risks. And as Claire drifted into restless sleep, she had no idea that her next step would pull her deeper into a web of betrayal that threatened to consume them all. Because Richard Davenport wasn't just hiding his wife. He was hiding a secret so dark it could destroy them all. The following morning, Claire sat at the small wooden table in the staff kitchen, her coffee untouched, her eyes fixed on the folded drawing Emily had given her. She replayed every moment at St. Mary's, the sight of Catherine alive but broken, the way her lips had whispered Emily, and Richard's threats. His words haunted her. "She's not who you think she is." If Catherine wasn't the loving wife and mother everyone believed, then who was she? And why would Richard hide her instead of telling his daughter the truth? Claire knew she couldn't untangle this alone. She needed someone who understood the Davenport family beyond the walls of this mansion. That was when her mind turned to Margaret, Catherine's sister. Margaret had always been kind to Claire, though she had distanced herself from the household after Catherine's death. If anyone carried pieces of this puzzle, it was her. That afternoon, while Emily was at piano practice, Claire took a bus across town to a quiet neighborhood on the north side. Margaret lived in a modest brick townhouse, a stark contrast to the luxury of Richard's estate. When Claire knocked, the older woman opened the door cautiously. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw the nanny standing there. "Claire, what on earth are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you, Margaret," Claire said, her voice trembling. "It's about Catherine." At the mention of her sister's name, Margaret's face paled. She ushered Claire inside quickly, closing the door as if to keep the very air from overhearing. They sat in the living room, and Claire wasted no time. She told Margaret everything: the drawing, the receipt, St. Mary's, and the glimpse of Catherine by the window. Margaret listened in silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When Claire finished, the older woman's eyes glistened with tears. "I knew it," she whispered. "All these years I felt it in my bones. Catherine was too strong to just vanish. Richard told me the accident killed her instantly. He even refused an open casket, said it was too traumatic. But something in his eyes that day. It was wrong." Claire leaned forward. "Why would he do this? Why hide her away? Why lie to his own daughter?" Margaret hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because Catherine knew something. She confided in me before the accident, if you can even call it that. She said Richard's company was hiding illegal dealings, money laundering through shell accounts overseas. She was terrified. She told me if anything happened to her, it wouldn't be an accident. She was going to expose him." Claire's stomach twisted. "So you think—" "He silenced her." Margaret shook her head. "I don't know. Richard is ruthless, but to hide her in a clinic? Maybe he thought that was mercy. Or maybe it was control. Either way, he didn't want the world or Emily to know. The room fell into heavy silence. Claire's mind raced. If this was true, Richard wasn't just a distant father or a prideful man. He was someone willing to bury the truth, even if it meant burying his wife alive in a hospital ward. Margaret gripped Claire's hand suddenly. You must be careful. Richard has allies everywhere. If he suspects you know the truth, he'll destroy you. Protect Emily first. That little girl is all that matters. Claire nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I will, but Emily deserves her mother. She deserves the truth, Margaret's voice cracked. Then you'll have to outsmart him. And if Catherine remembers what she knew about the company, you may be in more danger than you realize. Claire left Margaret's house with a heart heavier than when she arrived. Betrayal, corruption, a mother hidden away. It was all bigger than she had imagined. She looked at the folded drawing in her bag. Emily's small handwriting declaring, "Daddy lies," Claire whispered to herself as she boarded the bus back to the mansion. No more lies. But when she arrived, she froze at the sight waiting for her. Richard stood in the foyer, his face like stone, Emily clinging to his hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Where were you, Claire? Richard's voice was calm, but his eyes burned with fury. He knew she had been digging deeper. And this time he wasn't going to let it go. The mansion was eerily silent as Claire stepped inside, her heart pounding. Richard stood tall in the center of the marble foyer, one hand gripping Emily's small fingers, while the other hung stiffly at his side. Emily's face was red from crying, her little chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. Where were you, Claire? Richard's tone was measured, almost calm, but the calm of a storm seconds before it breaks. Claire forced herself to breathe evenly. I went out to run errands. Errands? He stepped closer, his shoes clicking on the polished floor. Errands that took you across town. Don't insult me. His voice dropped, dangerous. You've been speaking to Margaret, haven't you? Emily's wide eyes flickered between them. Daddy, please, don't be mad at Miss Claire, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Richard tightened his grip on Emily's hand, but he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his silence pressed harder than any shout. Claire, I warned you. Stay out of what doesn't concern you. Catherine is gone. Accept it. Claire's hands balled into fists. She had been patient, cautious, careful. But now, standing in front of the man who had condemned his own daughter to grow up believing her mother was dead, she couldn't hold back. No, Richard, she said, her voice trembling but strong. She's not gone. I saw her. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Emily gasped, her small hand flying to her mouth. Richard's face drained of color, then darkened with a rage so deep it was almost frightening. You don't know what you saw, he snapped. You think you're clever, sneaking around. You don't understand the danger you're putting Emily in. What danger? Claire demanded. The danger of a child knowing her own mother is alive? Or the danger of your empire crumbling if the truth comes out? Richard's chest heaved, his mask cracking. For the first time, he wasn't the composed millionaire with power at his fingertips. He was a man cornered, terrified of losing everything. Emily's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Daddy, is Mommy really alive? Richard froze. His lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, the truth he had buried so deep was demanded not by rivals, not by journalists, not by Claire, but by his daughter. The daughter he had sworn to protect with lies. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Why did you tell me she was dead? Her voice broke, carrying the heartbreak of every bedtime she had cried herself to sleep, believing her mother was gone forever. Richard staggered back a step, his hand slipping from Emily's. For a moment, he looked like a man broken, stripped of all his armor. I did it to protect you, he whispered. You don't understand. Your mother, she was going to destroy everything. Claire stepped forward, her voice steady. She wasn't going to destroy Emily. She was going to protect her from you, from your lies, from your greed. Richard's gaze snapped back to Claire, fury igniting once more. You don't know the full story, Claire. Catherine betrayed me first. She tried to expose me, yes, but not because she loved this family. Because she hated me. She was ready to take everything, including Emily, and vanish. I couldn't let that happen. The room fell into silence, every word echoing off the walls. Claire stared at him, horrified. Emily sobbed quietly, confusion and heartbreak written across her face. In that moment, Claire understood. The battle wasn't just about bringing Catherine back. It was about saving Emily's soul from being poisoned by a man who twisted truth into control. She bent down, pulling the little girl into her arms. "Emily, listen to me," Claire whispered gently. "Your mother loves you, and she's still out there. We're going to find her. No matter what," Richard's voice roared through the hall. "If you try, Claire, you'll regret it." But Claire held Emily tighter, her own voice steady with defiance. "The only thing I regret is letting your lies go on this long. The Millionaire's empire was built on fear and silence. But now, with a single drawing, a child's truth and a nanny's courage, his walls were crumbling. And what came next would decide the fate of them all." The storm broke 2 nights later. Claire had planned it carefully, with Margaret's quiet help. Emily deserved the truth, not whispers and shadows. And Catherine deserved to be seen, not hidden away like a shameful secret. Under the cover of evening, Claire drove Richard's sleek black car. Emily curled silently in the back seat, her small hands clutching the drawing that had started it all. They didn't speak much on the drive. The weight of what they were about to do pressed down on them both. But Claire's determination burned brighter than her fear. When they arrived at St. Mary's, Margaret was already waiting near the side entrance, her scarf pulled tightly around her shoulders. She greeted Emily with trembling arms, whispering, "You're about to see your mother, sweetheart." Emily's eyes widened, wet with tears. "Really? She's really here?" Claire squeezed her hand. "Yes, and she's been waiting for you." Inside the West Wing, the hall smelled of antiseptic and silence, just as before. Claire's pulse pounded as she led Emily to the room at the end of the corridor. Catherine sat in her chair by the window, her golden hair falling softly around her shoulders, her gaze distant until she heard the footsteps. Slowly she turned. For a moment time froze. Emily let out a cry, breaking free from Claire's hand. "Mummy!" The sound of that word seemed to pierce through the fog in Catherine's eyes. She blinked, as if awakening from a long sleep. "Emily?" Her voice cracked, fragile but real. Emily ran into her arms, sobbing. Catherine clutched her daughter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "My baby and my sweet girl." She kissed her hair again and again, as though trying to reclaim the years they had lost. Claire stood back, her own tears falling freely. It was the moment she had fought for, the reunion that Richard had sworn would never happen. But the peace shattered in seconds. The door slammed open. Richard Davenport stood there, his face twisted with rage, 2 security men flanking him. "What have you done?" His voice thundered through the room. "Claire, you've destroyed everything." Emily clung tighter to her mother. "Daddy, no! Mommy's alive." "You lied!" Richard's composure crumbled. He stepped forward, his hands shaking. "You don't understand, Emily. She was going to take you away from me. She wanted to ruin this family, ruin me. Enough, Richard." Catherine's voice rang out, stronger now, her eyes blazing with the fire of a woman who had been silenced too long. "You locked me away? You told our daughter I was dead? Whatever I planned to do, it was to protect her from the monster you were becoming." The room fell silent. Even the guards froze, stunned by the raw power of Catherine's words. Claire stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "It's over, Richard. Emily knows the truth. Catherine is alive, and your empire. It won't shield you anymore. Secrets always find their way out." Richard's chest rose and fell rapidly, the weight of years of lies crushing him. For the first time, he looked small, just a man caught in the wreckage of his own arrogance. He turned away, unable to meet his daughter's eyes. Emily's little voice, broken but brave, cut through the silence. "Daddy, I don't want your money. I just wanted my mom." The words broke him. Richard sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, the millionaire who had once seemed untouchable was reduced to nothing but a man who had lost the love of his child. Catherine held Emily close, whispering, "You'll never lose me again." Claire watched them, her heart swelling. She had come into this house as nothing more than a nanny. But she had become something far greater, a protector, a truth-bearer, the bridge between a mother and a child. And as the night settled over the clinic, she knew that redemption had come, not through money or power, but through love and courage. I'm John Parker, and remember, Every story hides a truth. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give your like. It means the world to me and helps us bring more stories like this one to life. Because sometimes, even the wealthiest millionaire is powerless against the truth whispered by a child's hand-drawn secret.